live online critique group. Today is Wednesday, April 8th, 2020. We're a minute or so behind schedule. We ran into a few technical glitches. And I'm actually, you'll notice my background is a little different. I'm coming to you live from our gallery in Pinetop, Arizona this morning. As everything crazy is going on in the world, we decided that we were getting a little bit of cabin fever in Phoenix, and I couldn't come into the gallery anyway. And so we've escaped to the mountains for a few days. They're discouraging that a little bit. They don't want us, using everybody's supplies and that kind of thing. But we brought everything with us that we would need. So we're enjoying some fresh mountain air, cooler weather. And I've been able to get into the gallery, kind of start to get us a little bit geared up for our summer season up here. So here we are. My internet connection is a little different here. So we may have some issues that way, but we'll roll through them. And also, we've got a number of us in the panel today. We're going to have a great discussion as we always do. And I'm pleased to welcome our featured artist, Corey. And Corey, you better help me say your last name. I want to say Goulet. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, it's Goulet.
Perfect. Well, we're very glad to have you here, Corey. Thank you for agreeing to join us for the online critique group and to talk about your work. And as usual, I'd love to get started by just getting a little bit of background information on you. First, tell us where you're coming from today, and then tell us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm here in sunny Washington.
Not always sunny.
Sunny today.
Good.
So we'll take it. So I am an abstract painter. I use both pastel and acrylics. And I still work full time. So I'm always juggling my art. Any moment, any second I can get, I'm into doing my art. So.
And are you in a situation where you are right now where you're getting a little more time than usual with your art, or are you still able to work?
No, I'm still able to work. I'm here in my home office, and I don't work in the factory, so I work in the offices. So I'm actually been a little busier than usual because it's pretty crazy right now. I work for a local aerospace company, so
yeah,
it's been a little crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us your background. How did you become interested in art and begin creating?
So, as I'm a mom, and as my kids got older and started doing their own things, I needed to find something for myself. And while I'd always been crafty and creative, I hadn't taken it much further. So I just kind of zeroed in on some acrylic classes. I started in acrylics, and then I moved to pasteling. I ended up taking classes at a local community college as well for drawing, painting, all sorts of stuff. And then it wasn't until, when I started the normal way, I was doing landscapes and portraits and things like that. And it wasn't until I was invited to join a group of other artists on a 3-week trip to Italy. And it was just that whole artist and sense of community and just making a connection with fellow artists. And they were at all different levels. I just like, oh, this really sealed it for me. This is what I really want to do. I want to make connections, and and I've continued that. And those people from so many years ago are still friends. We're still connecting, and I just love that so much, that sense of artist community. So, and the learning and and the sharing of knowledge and all that.
And how did you begin showing and kind of sharing your art with the public, and talk about experience that you've had with sales of your work and exposure that way?
So I belong to a few pastel societies, and each one puts on a couple shows each year. So they're juried shows. You don't always get into every one either. So most of my putting my art out there, that's how it began. And from that it's grown, and I developed a website, Facebook, Instagram, all those social media accounts. But it was really the last couple years that I've really been pushing my art forward, trying to really get it out there, get a name. I've entered a lot of other online shows because there's quite a variety out there. If you do searches, there's a lot of opportunities in many different states. So that's really, I think, really putting my art out there. Then I've had like a couple local places, like the local library. A friend and I showed our work there a few years ago. This year I had my art up at Dakota Pastels. They have set up an area now for artists to have their own art up there, kind of your own little mini show, things like that. I haven't ever had a solo show per se in a regular gallery, I guess. And sales, sales are not so great right now. So
yeah, so there's a lot of opportunity for growth and moving forward, and I think we're going to have, as we talk about your work, I'm going to offer you some words of encouragement in that regard. So let's with that, a little bit of background in mind, and kind of understanding that in some senses you're fairly early in your career as an artist. Let's jump in and take a look at the work itself. Let me get us over. And just as kind of a reminder, as we jump into the critique, what we're looking to do is kind of look at several different aspects of the featured artist's work. And of course, in this case, Corey's work. And so we're looking at consistency, the quality of the work, and that would be both quality in terms of composition and technique, but also the quality of the presentation of the work, the style. We'll talk about marketability, pricing, and then offer some words of encouragement as well. And so let's jump in, and let me see if I can get us in here. So we've got, as usual, 5 pieces that we'll be looking at. And Corey, as we look at these pieces, it seems you mentioned you're working in pastel, and so we're seeing that the scale of the work is kind of in the smaller range relative to maybe some of the other artists that we've focused in and featured on. So talk a little bit about that. Talk about the scale and scope of your work.
Well, these particular pieces, I do actually tend to work larger. And I usually tend to work larger more in acrylics right now. And really for pasteling,
there's some physical limitations, right?
Well, yeah, and it's, they're fragile when you get them too large. I mean, I've got things that are 40 by 40 in pastels, but it's also it's really expensive to frame them. Now that's acrylic, just a small piece. But it's really the price for framing, and that they're become fragile the larger you get. I've kind of settled on 21 by 27, I think, for the most part for pastels. And that's pretty good size when you put a mat with it and have it. All my work in pastels are professionally framed. So, and that's another piece in acrylic. Those are 2 acrylic pieces.
And Corey, what, as you were getting started with your art, what drew you to abstract work? Did you try other subject matter, or did you kind of always know you wanted to go in an abstract direction?
I started, with landscapes and portraitures, and the abstract element was really in the warm-ups, before I started painting and things like that. And then it kind of grew from that. I started seeing pieces and elements I liked in those warm-up papers or warm-up acrylics, and I just kind of started, and I took a workshop in abstract pasteling just to, and I just love the freedom, I guess, I get from that I don't necessarily get from, say, working in a landscape or portrait. So yeah.
And so these last 2 pieces are pretty significantly different than the first 3. And we noticed, and several commenters noticed, that you've listed these as unpriced. Tell us a little bit about these last 2 pieces and kind of this direction.
Oh, these last 2 pieces, Yeah, I haven't priced those yet. They were just, working. This is kind of a little bit of a new technique with more collage pieces, negative elements, taking away to add, really let the prime elements shine through, I guess. So yeah, I hadn't priced those yet. My formula typically for pricing is, the height times the width formula. And then, you put a value in for where you are, for your reputation as an artist, and add any framing or anything like that. So this here, it's professionally framed. And I have that for all mine because they're a little more fragile. The pastel works are a little more fragile, and for shows too. So that one went on to a show in Arkansas. So, and this is how I would typically mount the acrylic pieces on the back of cradled wood panel.
And so are the acrylics painted directly on the wood? Are they on paper as well? Or how are you doing the acrylics?
So typically I will do the acrylics on paper and then mount them to the cradled wood panel. And I do varied sizes of those as well. So those I tend to larger. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Well, I would love to get, and let's see how well I can do this. Hold on here. I've got, I'd love to get in and get some comments from our, both our panelists and anyone who is attending who would like to get in. I'm going to go ahead and lower everyone's hand. And if we can start by just getting kind of your impressions of the work, what your response to the work is. I'd love to get feedback from attendees. So you can either, if you're in the video panel, you can just unmute yourself and hop into the conversation. If you are an attendee and not yet in the video, go ahead and raise your hand and I can bring you in that way. Any comments from panel? Dan, it looks like I've got maybe some comments from you, and then I'll go to Elizabeth.
Sure. You can hear me?
Yep, got you loud and clear.
In my description, self-description, I describe myself as a card-carrying abstract snob because I feel like we see so much bad abstract stuff out there. And I'm happy to say that Corey's work does not fit that description. And it's hard to describe what is bad and good.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you know it when you see it, right,
yeah,
Dan?
You know it when you see it. I mean, it's a very abstract description, but it reflects an intelligence. It looks like, okay, somebody intelligent did this, and this is here, and everything's on purpose. And so clearly, I see that in your work, Corey. So good news. I'm not pulling out my snob card.
Oh.
Thank you.
Excellent. Elizabeth, I think I've got you on. Good morning.
Good morning. I have two questions here. Since I'm not an abstract artist, and I love your work, Corey, it's beautiful. And my eye enjoys the trip that I'm taking on your paper. The values are gorgeous. The colors are gorgeous. The thing that I want to ask, because I don't understand it, I think I've done one abstract painting in my life, and that was in a workshop, and so it was very well guided. What's in your brain when you're doing this? What are you thinking about? Do you see this before you put it down, or is it just a work in progress and you balance it out? I mean, do you have a composition? Can you even answer that, or do you know what you're doing?
Yeah. My work's very intuitive, but for me, part of my process, I start with music first and foremost. I put some good music on, and some of my favorite artists, Nina Simone, is one of my favorite. A lot of energy. So what I try to convey in my work, in all my work, is energy. I don't want my work to be dark. I want it to be light and full of energy. So, for me, I don't have an end product in mind. I may choose a handful of colors that I want to use in a particular painting and kind of go from there. you know, I have a process where I do a warm up, which is mark making and getting your full body, you know, warmed up and into the movement of it.
Mhm.
I don't have an end result in mind necessarily. I may have some ideas, you know, along the way, how I want it to go, but it's really, you know, it's me, you know, my memories, it's what's going on in that particular day, and just trying to lose myself in the moment of the creation of art, and putting out, you know, tuning out all those other distractions and just responding to the paper.
That's
you know?
great.
Yeah.
You have a very good intuitive sense about yourself then, if that's the way you create it. I love those words that you're using. The second one is more technical. And why do you do acrylic on paper and not canvas? It's just wondering.
Well, I like that it's rigid, a little more rigid, and it's not as flexible, because when I'm doing acrylics, I am, you know, scratching in, I'm mark making, I'm moving it around, putting collage down, sanding, taking collage off. I find I can really basically abuse the paper a lot more than I can canvas.
Really? Wow. Okay. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, so very interesting conversation and discussion, and it is kind of fascinating to me. And at Xanadu, we have over the years shown and sold many abstract artists' work, and it's really fun and sometimes a little bit frustrating for us to see people encounter abstract work if maybe they're not quite as attuned to it or accustomed to abstract work. And you hear the comments, oh, my kid could have done this. Or,
Yeah.
you know, anyone. And I always, I refrain, but I always want to say, you know, you really are not understanding what's going on in this work with that kind of approach to it. I was speaking to one of the artists that we represent, who is a more representational landscape artist, and we were talking about abstract work, and he had recently gone through a process where he was just for his own personal edification and experience was doing some abstract pieces, and he said, "Damn, this is hard work. You know, it's." A landscape, anyone can do that. You know, you're standing there, there's the landscape, here's a mountain, here's a tree, you put that in. But when you're free of all that to do the abstract work, suddenly you've got some real decisions to make. You know, it's much easier to go in the wrong directions. And so we really work to try and educate our collectors about what it is in abstract work. No, it's not just throwing a bunch of color and shapes and movement onto a canvas. There's a lot to do it well. You know, kind of going along with what Dan was saying, to do it well really takes some not only effort, but some skill and talent and many, often many years of experimentation and learning and moving different directions. So I really appreciate, Corey, what it takes to achieve what you're doing in creating this work. Let's see if I can get in. Alice, I think I've got Alice Edwards. Alice, let's see if we can get you in. I think you had a comment.
Okay, it just asked me to unmute myself.
Yep, I've got you loud and clear.
Okay, but I don't see my video.
You know, it is only giving us audio, so we're just going to take it on faith that you're there, and we'll take the audio from you.
Oh, that's okay. I'm having a bad hair day anyway. At first I thought something was wrong with my Zoom because all of my own personal Zoom page is working fine. But
yeah, so we're actually in a Zoom webinar, so not everyone gets to be on video because there are so many of us. And we'll invite some into the panel and everyone else will just come in via audio.
Okay, I did comment in the chat that I particularly like the pastel. To my eye, it has a freshness that's not as apparent in the acrylics. And I like that freshness. I like the pastel areas that appear to be a little bit more scumbled than solidly covered. I'm looking at one that's red and purple. And again, I can see the broad strokes of the sides of the pastel stick. And that implies a lot of energy to me and movement. And so I really like it. And I like the juxtaposition of the one that I'm looking at right now called the warm up.
Mhm.
And it's very rich. I mean, you could almost eat that color. It really pops. And that couple of two little dots of red against the edge of the purple. And this one, I don't know what it, wait a minute, what it's called. House Graffiti Art 2.
Yeah.
This, in some ways, the stylistic difference is much more apparent than the other two.
Yeah, and I think that's this leads us right into that conversation. And thank you, Alice. It is you know, in talking about this question of consistency, and this is one of the key points that we'll be talking about in all of our sessions, is thinking about consistency. You know, when you're thinking about showing the work, be it at you know, an open studio event or in a gallery. And you're starting to think about the experience that a collector is going to have, we want to be careful not to have too jarring a transition between, you know, one piece and the next.
Mhm.
And looking over these 5 pieces, I think you would say these first 3, the pastels, could very easily show together, you know, even though there's some variety in terms of the palette, the tonal qualities and values are consistent, and the compositions are consistent. And then as we get to the acrylics, there is that more harsh transition, and we can feel that, okay, this is certainly a different direction. There is not only a difference in terms of the materials, but there's a difference in terms of the sensibility of the work. This has got a little bit more of an edge to it. Almost feels like, you know, now the other pieces were about the composition. These pieces have a little bit more of a, you know, more commentary with the collage elements in them. And so it has a very different feel. I would be hesitant to show these 2 different, and of course we're just looking at very small samplings of them here, but I'd be hesitant to show these works together in my gallery, because I do feel that they're so significantly different. But having said that, I would think that either grouping there could work very well and very strongly and be very consistent, and could have a strong appeal to a different, you know, a different audience. And so, Corey, as you kind of move forward, are you leaning more in one direction or the other? Do you feel like you're getting more of a following for one body of work over the other?
Well, I agree with you. Let's start with that. I wouldn't show them in the same show either. These are a little more edgy, and they're more of a statement, and that was intentional. So I would not put those in the same the same venue. So it's just a different feel, feel, different vibe. So.
And are you working more in one direction or the other right now, or?
You know, I go back and forth because, you know, generally my weekends are art, and I could work on, you know, pasteling one day and acrylics the next day, you know, so, and they do have 2 different vibes to them.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know, I really like this process. It's, you know, it's layering and layering, putting down acrylics, you're sanding, you're lifting, you're really trying to narrow down what are the important elements of the piece, you know, some, and just define it as that. So these are really more, that's why I call some of it in-house graffiti art, because it's a little more raw, and I like the rawness for this particular acrylic style.
Yeah, and I think you would find that, and this is a, certainly a challenge that many artists early in their careers are going to face, is that they're going to find, and sometimes with more dramatic differences than what we're seeing here. Here both of the sensibilities are abstract, and there's some overlap in terms of technique. There are some artists who early in their careers find themselves trying to decide between abstract and landscape or more representational work, and have to make some decisions if they're going to push forward and be more serious about marketing and showing their work. Okay, which direction am I going to go in? I would, if you were to start thinking about wanting to show your work in galleries and kind of pursue, that track and create a following among collectors, I would think that initially you'd want to take one of these bodies of work and decide, okay, this is where I'm going to put my focus in terms of my marketing efforts. So that doesn't mean I'll stop doing the other work.
Mhm.
But I'm going to have that other work on the side and do it more, at least initially, for my my personal satisfaction at this point. But all my marketing efforts and my website and portfolio are going to be focused on one or the other, and go out and show those to galleries. And I think that in either one of these bodies of work, you could find a marketplace for that work. The pastels, I would suspect, might have a little bit more of a well, just in terms of composition and style, they might have a broader audience nationally, whereas the collage acrylic works are going to be a little bit more, as I used the word earlier, they have a little bit of an edge to them. They're a little bit more of a harsh contemporary feel.
Yeah.
Harsh is not the right word, but
Well,
you know what I mean. They just have a little bit more of a statement to them,
yeah.
and are probably going to appeal more in a more minimalist kind of setting or an urban kind of market, more contemporary. Whereas I think the acrylic pieces could have a cross appeal. We've sold abstract work to people who are in traditional homes and settings, and so it's a decision that you'd want to think about pretty intently. Where do I want to be spending a lot of my time in terms of creation, and put your focus there. Now, in terms of pricing, you mentioned that you are working with a per square inch formula, and kind of thinking about in terms of your multiplier, thinking about kind of how well established you are and those kinds of things. And we've talked about pricing in all of these broadcasts. I would discourage you from spending too much time thinking about how experienced you are or what your position is in the marketplace. And instead, I would look at other artists whose work would have a similar appeal, would attract a similar collector. And I would look at how those artists are pricing their work. And I would use that as a strong influence towards how you price your work. We want to be a little bit careful about subjectively trying to figure out where we fit in terms of, how well developed is my work? How experienced am I? What kind of reputation do I have? What kind of following do I have? Because that's going to tend to have you undervalue your work. And remember, when you're showing in a gallery, especially, and a collector's walking through the door of the gallery and seeing your art, they have really no idea how well established you are, how long you've been doing this, other than the price tag that you're putting on your work. And so it can almost be self-defeating to have a price point that's too low. Now, I don't necessarily think, kind of looking at your price points, I don't think that you're necessarily dramatically underpriced from my experience in the market. But you certainly could have some room for moving that price point up. More importantly, I think you just want to strive to have that consistency, and it's great that you're already using a per square inch formula that can have you move in that direction. Do you price? You mentioned you don't yet have pricing on these on the acrylic pieces. Do you? What's kind of your thought process there in terms of how it would compare to your pastel works?
Well, my pastels, they're professionally framed. I know that it's supposed to be art is art no matter where it goes, whether it's, a gallery or a show, price is price. These, they're on cradled wood panel versus, professionally framed, expensive framing. I use top quality museum glass. Everything's top grade, whatever I do frame. Not to discount these by any means. These haven't been in any type of shows as my pastel pieces have, things like that. So, I mean, since I belong to pastel societies, I've done in many shows. I haven't, I just got Best in Show for one of my pieces for a show in Colorado. But so these I still have to work on my pricing, I guess.
Figuring that out.
Yeah, it's
so
always
my
challenging.
typical suggestion would be, as you're thinking about how to price these pieces, would be, as I just mentioned, sit down and do some internet search to find other artists who are working in a similar scale, similar subject matter, even though the style is going to be somewhat different, and just kind of get a sense of where the range of price points are. My typical suggestion is look at 10 artists who are doing work in the same vein that you are, see how they're pricing their work. And then just make sure you're in that range. And you wouldn't want to be on the high end, but nor would you want to be on the low end of that range. As you do that, then you've got the right price point to then go out and show the work in gallery venues, if that's the direction that you want to go in and start to generate some sales. Now, talk, Corey, a little bit about production. You mentioned, you're working full time, so you don't have tons of time to create the work. How many pieces would you say, just roughly, how many pieces are you creating per year?
Oh gosh, per year. Well, let's see if I could break it down. It'll take me a couple weekends. I think it just depends on the size too. That's a tough question. How many pieces a year?
20, 50,
uh,
15, 30.
I would say, well, let's see, 30. I'll go with 30.
30. That sounds like a good answer. Okay, good. That just kind of gives us a sense. And again, thinking about, and you keep hearing me talk about, okay, your portfolio and pricing, if you want to go talk to galleries. That's because, Corey, I'm going to encourage you to do that. I think you've got a style and work that is mature enough that you should be showing in venues where you could be generating consistent exposure for the work. And starting to generate some sales. Shows are great, and those kind of events can really help build a resume and build exposure for the work and start to gain a following for your work, in terms of maybe getting some social media following and building a mailing list. But ultimately, if you want to start generating consistent sales, it's good to have it out in the marketplace where the intention is to cause that to happen as it would in galleries. Let me get to some of the comments, and then I'll bring in some more of you on the panel to comment. Just here's some comments and feedback that we got from folks who looked over the work prior to today's session. And Laura says, there appears to be a tendency to put the center of attention in, well, the center. I see this most in Elvis and View from Above. My suggestion is to move the focus to a 1/3 position. So there's just a little feedback. And of course, again, we're seeing such a small sampling of your work. Julia from Indianapolis says, the work caught my interest because of its vibrancy. I think the compositions work because though the use of color and directional color fields, or through the use of color and directional fields, my eye is moving around the painting. And I wanted to pause there because I also, when I was first looking at your work, that was something that drew me in, was this movement. And how important is that to you, and how much are you thinking about moving someone around the composition?
Well, as I get, as I'm progressing into the painting, energy is very important to me. Creating a sense of energy and some movement and making sure my eye is traveling through the piece. And as the end, as you're finessing and finalizing the painting, Part of my process is taking pictures, looking at the image in a mirror in the reverse, upside down. I constantly, when I'm creating an abstract, turning it around. But in the end, it all has to come together just like any other piece. You want your eye to move around the painting and create those elements that keep, whether they're connected lines, connected shapes, color, just that whole process. It all has to come together just like a regular painting.
And Julia makes another point. She says, I like the titles. They suggest ideas for me to think about while standing in front of the paintings. I see stories. Now, this could be a really controversial topic when it comes to abstract work. And there is certainly a vein I've noticed in the contemporary art market of artists who are doing that kind of work and really don't want to get involved in the interpretation side of things. And so there's lots of untitled or composition number 2, that kind of thing, very broad, loose. And then there's the other side where like you, there's some context and narrative being given through the title. How do you come up with your titles, and what are your thoughts on titling these works?
Well, it's in the end, it's what am I seeing? And say for Elvis, I saw what looked like an abstract shape of Elvis in there. But, I'm one of those people, I don't necessarily want my painting to give you the story. I want you to look at my painting. I have a lot of subtle marks. There's a lot of, contrast. But I want you to come up with your story, to actually look at it. What are you feeling? How does it make you feel? And to come up with your story. I don't want to tell you the whole story.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and so that's a really interesting challenge for an abstract artist, right? You don't want to tell the whole story, and yet with a title, you're kind of potentially giving some direction there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do come down on my preference, and as I'm working with my artists, my preference is for the artist to go ahead and give the work a title. To start to create some of that narrative. And what I found is that collectors are going to bring their interpretations anyway. And sometimes, and we've had our clients do this, they look at a piece and they see what they want, are experiencing what they want to see in the piece. And then they'll see the title, and sometimes it resonates and really adds another dimension. And other times we've had the client say, well, I'm buying this piece, but I'm changing the title. Once I own it, I get to change the title and call it whatever I want. And we're fine with that. And I think that giving the work a title and especially with abstract work, giving someone something to think about as they're experiencing the work and trying to give them a little bit of an insight into your mind can really add that extra dimension. And, sometimes it'll resonate and sometimes it won't. But if a client loves a piece, that's not going to be detrimental to their decision to make a purchase of that work.
I have one piece that I created called Climate Change, and it's quite large. It's 39 by 40. And I actually had a statement. That piece I just felt like there was so much going on in it, so much movement. It felt like climate change. And that's what I titled it, because I wanted people to think about that as well.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, there's an opportunity in your work to share a story or a narrative or a point of view. Barbara says, strong pieces, but seen artwork similar to these before. What differentiates these pieces from similar works, however nice? So this is really another kind of interesting question, and it's a challenge, not just for an abstract artist, it's a challenge for every single artist, right? What is it about my work that makes my work unique and different? And how much do I worry about the fact that, I'm not creating something that's totally new and unique and different? And Corey, talk about that. As you look at other abstract artists, what are you experiencing in terms of thinking about creating something different in your work?
Well, I don't create work for other people. Let's say that. I create work with something that I have to do myself, for myself. And I work hard to create something different and part of that is, you're learning and continuously using different tools and trying different techniques and finding what fits, finding your voice. And so it's one thing I do work hard to try to create something different and unique. I don't want my art to be like anyone else's. I want it to be fresh and interesting, and to get people talking about it, whether they like it or not, but to get a conversation going, and to just really learn, I guess, to look at art. Like I said, I put a lot of subtle marks and different things like that into my pieces. So I think learning, keeping yourself fresh, just learning from other artists is important too. Because then you can take those tools and apply them however you want in your pieces.
Yeah, it's this, as I say, this is something that every artist, I suspect, is going to think about at some point.
Oh yeah.
And if you're trying, I mean, if I like to think of it this way: if I have an artist come to me, I'd say, I'm doing something that is totally fresh and has never been seen in the history of the art world before. I always have to say, well, boy, I've got some bad news for you. It's just, it's all been done to some degree or another. That's not what we're here to worry about. And my goodness, what are you going to do? You create a piece and then you're going to go online and look through millions of works of art to make sure that you're not, inadvertently duplicating something that someone else has done. You are going to bring your own voice and inspiration and unique viewpoint to your work. Even if there are some similarities with other artists, I just would not worry about that. If you're creating work that is true to what you're trying to achieve, you're not intentionally setting out to duplicate something that someone else is doing, it's going to be unique, and viewers are going to respond to that. And certainly in our gallery, we have some artists who are doing some pretty unique work, but ultimately our clientele is going to respond on an emotional level to the work. And if you can create that emotional connection for a viewer, you're going to have collectors. Corey, we've run through our time, and I didn't get a chance to get to everyone's comments or even get as many people. It seems like we never have quite enough time, but I want to thank you for joining us for this, for allowing us to look at your work and talk a little bit about your work. And as I said, I am going to encourage you to think about putting together a portfolio and getting out and talking to some galleries. I would wait until the current situation has stabilized a little bit before doing that. But you've got a consistency in your work. And I believe that by building your work out and having a portfolio of 20 to 25 of either work, the pastel work or the acrylic work, you would find interest in galleries and in collectors. So I would really encourage you to do that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. It's great to get feedback, and, you take all that in, and, lessons learned, things like that. So I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody's comments. So.
Yes. Well, and hopefully we all, by looking at each other's work, all get a chance to reflect on our own work as well, and have that ongoing conversation. Thanks for joining us, everyone, into the third dimension and looking at sculpture next week. So we're a little bit of a change of pace, and we'll look forward to seeing you in that session. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a great week. Stay well, stay safe.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.